Welcome back. This is going to be one of the most interesting, exciting lessons because we're going to take everything we've learned about the brain and start applying it to relationships. So we call it understanding other people's brains. Your brain is involved in everything you do and all of your relationships. How you think, how you feel, how you act, how you get along with your partner, with your parents, with your siblings, with your coworkers, with other students. Your brain is involved in everything you do and every connection that you make. Your brain decides who is attractive to you, how to get a date, how well you do on the date, how long those feelings last, when to be married, and how well you do being married. When your brain works right, you work right. And you tend to be thoughtful, playful, romantic, consistent, committed, loving. When your brain is troubled, you tend to be impulsive, which can devastate relationships, distracted, addicted, unfaithful, angry, even hateful. And having been a psychiatrist for the last 35 years, I know when people break up, it can be very painful. But when someone's brain's obsessive, they can go on hating that other person for decades and end up spending a lot of money on attorneys. Your brain is involved in everything you do in every relationship you have. Now, one of the interesting things we've learned is that there are significant differences between the male and female brains. You can see that one switch there for the male brain on or off, and many switches for the female brain. So let's just talk about some of the differences. The corpus callosum, that's in green on the slide, connects the left hemisphere to the right hemisphere. In studies, it's been shown to be larger in females than in males, which means they tend to use both hemispheres at the same time, where males tend to be more left-sided in general. Women tend to use both sides. Let's talk a little bit about the different sides of the brain, the left hemisphere. So that's the left half versus the right half. So the left half tends to be more involved with details. The right side, more with the big picture. So on the left, people, it tends to work with logic and logical thought. It's more precise, detail-oriented, so it tends to see the trees in the forest. It's involved in language and communication. It's concerned about time. It's happier and more positive, and it doesn't tend to see problems. So when you hurt the left side, people tend to get depressed. It's like you hurt the happy side of the brain, and what we've seen, and other researchers have seen this as well, there's a higher incidence of depression with left-sided problems. The right side, it's sort of the big picture part of the brain, sees the forest, more creative, artistic, but it's also the more negative side, anxious, fearful, mournful side of the brain. So when the right side is busy, people tend to be pretty anxious. Focuses on problems, which is important because if you don't admit you have a problem, you can't do anything to solve the problem. It's also the part that is more in processing music and rhythm. I mean, both sides do, but more on the right side. And it operates on hunches. So you might not know exactly why you're afraid of a situation or why you like somebody or even don't like someone, it's sort of like you can't explain it, but you know it. That's the right hemisphere talking to you. There are differences in language between the male and female brain. Men tend to be more left-sided, so perhaps more detail-oriented. Women tend to use both hemispheres for language. The studies vary. You know, some studies say that women don't talk more than men. Personally, having 5 sisters and 3 daughters and a son, my experience is they do use more words. Women tend to be better at multitasking. They have more neuronal connections and larger highways between the left and right hemisphere. Men tend to do one thing at a time. So while driving in a car, you know, if a man has to stop and actually look at his phone or look at a map, he'll turn down the radio and focus on that one thing. Females often don't have to do that. Now, as we've talked about before, multitasking is not necessarily a good thing, but when a woman has a baby, her brain actually gets remodeled so that multitasking is even easier. It's why she might cook, take care of the kids, talk on the phone at the same time. Harder for men because of the connections in their brain. There are differences in the limbic or emotional brain. It's larger in women, so bonding tends to be easier. There's not one society on earth where men are primary caretakers of children. Now, men are doing a much better job, I think, than they used to, but in every society, females are the primary caretakers for children and much more likely to be the primary caretakers for the elderly. Because the limbic brain is larger, women have a larger nesting instinct, and they actually get more attached to their homes than males do. As an Army psychiatrist for 7 years, and what I often find when people had to move, because in the Army there was a lot of moving, that women, much more than men, would get depressed right after a move until their new home, until they could sort of build their own nest, until they felt more comfortable with it. Because there's a larger limbic or emotional brain in women, they have a higher incidence of depression. It's twice what it is in males. Women tend to see problems because of the right hemisphere and access to the right hemisphere. They tend to see problems faster in relationships. And when someone leaves a relationship, the studies say 75% of the time it's women. So, you know, a lot of people think, wow, men cheat more than women. But when someone's deciding to break up or get divorced, it is more often a female decision. When we talk about the parietal lobe, so top back part of your brain, they're involved in direction sense, larger in men, especially on the left side, which is why perhaps they may be better at catching footballs. This part of the brain estimates time, judges speed, visualizes objects in 3D, so catching a football or a baseball. Larger right side in women, and the right side of the brain is when you admit problems. So it may be why they know they're lost and they're much more likely to ask for help in directions. So when I started looking at the brain, and I would see a healthy scan versus the one on the right, which by now you know is not healthy, I just thought, well, this may be the missing link on why people struggle in relationships and nobody really understands. So I saw this couple who failed marital therapy. So they went for 3 years, spent $25,000. And at the end of 3 years, the therapist said, get divorced because this isn't working. And they didn't want to be divorced, so they ended up coming to see me. And when I saw this guy's brain, it looked like he was a drug addict. And, all of you have seen drug-affected scans, and this looks like one. But he never used drugs. He didn't drink. What happened is he started working in a furniture factory, and he was exposed to inhalants, basically, organic solvents, as he was finishing furniture, and it was damaging his brain. That's actually when his relationship started going downhill. And so the treatment for him was not divorce, it was getting him out of that job and beginning to rehabilitate his brain. So if you didn't know that, you would just sort of think he was a jerk because he acted badly. But, when you start to think about relationships from the brain, you don't talk about people being a jerk. You go, well, I wonder what's going on with his or her brain. The first time I scanned a couple was 1991. I just started doing our imaging work. And as a psychiatrist, part of my job is I would see kids and often their parents. And so Bob and Betsy brought their 2 kids to see me. Little boy had ADD and oppositional defiant disorder. Little girl had inattentive ADD. And she got better when I put her on some supplements and medication, but the little boy didn't. And as I saw him, I realized one of the reasons he wasn't getting better is because his mom and dad hated each other. And so I told the couple, I said, why don't you see me? Let me see if I can help you with your marriage. And I saw them for 9 months, and it wasn't working. I mean, nothing I did really worked. And so I decided to scan them. And Betsy's brain, way too hard. It worked way too hard in her frontal lobes, worried, rigid, inflexible. Things don't go her way. She got upset, held grudges, argumentative. And Bob's brain, he had low activity in his frontal lobe. So he had ADD. So he had he had given the ADD to his children. But Betsy's obsessiveness, so the little boy, oppositional defiant disorder, which we talked, that can go along with a hot cingulate or being more over-focused or obsessed. And so the little boy actually got a combination of both. Mom and dad scan. And when I saw their scans, I calmed her cingulate down with some medicine, and then I stimulated his, and then they didn't need to see therapists anymore. I balanced their brain, and they just did so much better. And that's when I started thinking, the brain's really important when it comes to relationships. Here's a couple I saw where they both were hyperfrontal. That just means their frontal lobes are hyperactive, worried, rigid, inflexible. Things don't go their way. So as you can imagine, they fought all the time. When we calmed them down, they did better. And here's a couple where there's low activity. One from toxic exposure, drug abuse on the left. The other one on the right from a head injury. And this is not uncommon, right? As we've talked about, brain health issues are rampant in our society. And if you have one of them, just get smart enough to do something about it. When I helped them, this couple had actually lost their kids. The Child Protective Service had taken their kids away. And it was because, and they were both really good people, but it's hard to act good when your brains are troubled. So in understanding the brains of others, it's more than just about you. We rely on others to learn, to live, to love, and find joy. Well, what if their brains are struggling? What if they have low activity in the prefrontal cortex or high activity in the anterior cingulate gyrus, the basal ganglia, or the deep limbic system? So remember the prefrontal cortex. It's the front third of your brain, largest in humans and any other animal by far. I love this quote from Dudley Moore. He was a British comedian. He said, the best car safety device is a rear view mirror with a cop in it. Well, that's what your prefrontal cortex does. If you're driving, you know if you see a cop in your rear view mirror, you're going to act better. So your prefrontal cortex is your supervisor. It watches you. Focus, forethought, impulse control, organization, planning, judgment, empathy, insight, learning from the mistakes you make. So positive relational statements for when your prefrontal cortex works well, people say things like, you're important to me. Let's do something tonight. Forethought and empathy. I'll be on time for our date, and then you are on time. Let's get these chores done so we'll have more time together. Forethought. I don't want to fight. Let's take a break and come back in 10 minutes and work this out. I made that mistake before. I'm not making it again. And remember what we said about the prefrontal cortex. It's not fully developed until you're 25 or 28 if you do good things for your brain. And so if you make mistakes, be easy on yourself. Just try to learn from them. When there are issues with the prefrontal cortex in relationships, impulsivity, empathy, organization, judgment, focus, planning, procrastination. Say things you later regret. Don't think about the consequences of your behavior. It can devastate a relationship. Distracted, says or does hurtful things. Conflict seeking. Remember we talked about the prefrontal cortex when it's low, people sort of stir stuff up just 'cause. Unconsciously it makes them feel better, but it can cause a lot of problems in relationships. Negative things that are often, so people have prefrontal cortex issues, what they might say, well, I'm only a half an hour late. Why are you uptight? I had somebody in my life, always late, no matter what, always late. I even tell him the wrong time just to see if he would, I could figure out how late he would be. He was always later than even that. I find it hard to listen. Go ahead and talk to me. I can listen to you while I'm watching TV and reading this book. I didn't mean to make hurtful comments. It happens a lot. What will the partners say of someone who's got low activity in their prefrontal cortex? He's impulsive, blurts out, and interrupts. He doesn't pay attention to me. She starts problems for no particular reason. He loves to challenge everything I say. She can't sit still. He or she's always late. And remember, help for the prefrontal cortex. So set goals. So really know what you want. Exercise. Higher protein. Lower simple carbohydrate diet. Get these two little words in your head, then what? If I do this, then what happens? If I say this, then what will happen? And learn to say, I'm sorry. Very powerful words. There was a very famous movie many years ago, and there's a line in it, love story, that said, love means never having to say you're sorry. That was just total nonsense. You want to be able to say you're sorry when you do something that hurts somebody else's feelings. So if you have a brother or sister or a father or mother or boyfriend or girlfriend with a prefrontal cortex problem, try not to take it personally. Notice the positive because a lot of other people have been noticing negative things about them. Don't be their stimulant. What that means is if they're conflict seeking, don't just engage in the conflict. If they're poking you emotionally, take a break. Try not to react. And help them with things like appointments and organization. So what if they're cingulate? Works too hard. Remember we talked about this. Cognitive flexibility helps you shift your attention, go from idea to idea, see options, go with the flow, cooperation. It's involved in error detection and being able to let go of hurts from the past, forgiving. When it works right in relationships, they're forgiving. It's okay. I can roll with that situation. How would you like to do this so they can get out of their head and into the head of other people? Let's collaborate. What would you like to do? I'm not upset, it's in the past, so they can forgive. Starting today, I need to forget what's gone, appreciate what still remains, and look forward to what's coming next. That's when the cingulate works right. When there are problems in this part of the brain, get stuck, worried, rigid, inflexible, hold grudges, can be obsessed about things or have compulsive behaviors, addictions, oppositional, argumentative, and see too many errors. Like as we talked about, you have this little mouse on an exercise wheel in your head, and the mouse can't get off over and over, on and on. In relationships, what the people who have too much activity in their cingulate gyrates, what you'll hear them say is, you hurt me. I won't forgive you. I'll never be the same. I'm always worried. I get stuck on these bad thoughts. Do it my way. I can't change. It's your fault. No, 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 no. Not my fault. What their partners will say is nothing gets forgiven or let go. Everything has to be his way. She or he holds on to grudges forever. If things aren't perfect, they're no good at all. He argues with everything I say. She tends to be oppositional, or he tends to be oppositional. It means no matter what it is you say, they argue with you. So how do we help the anterior cingulate? Notice when you're stuck. Take a break if things get heated. Exercise, so helpful to calm down this part of the brain. Don't go on a low-carb diet. It'll make you focus more on the things that upset you. So a healthy diet, but what we call complex carbohydrates. So those are carbohydrates that don't quickly turn to sugar. Don't nag. Notice if you're doing that. And forgiveness is so powerful, and it actually helps your brain work better. If you're a partner of somebody or friend who can get stuck, notice when you're stuck. Take a break if things get heated. Exercise together. Encourage them to eat complex carbohydrates. Try not to take it personally, and forgiveness is just so important. Remember the basal ganglia. It blends feeling and movement, controls the body's idle. It's involved in anxiety when it works too hard. Also controls smooth motor movement like handwriting. And when it's right, when it works in a healthy way, people tend to be more positive. I know things will work out. I can speak out when I have a problem. I don't let problems fester. So you can be assertive. I usually feel physically relaxed. I'm usually calm in new situations. When people have basal ganglia issues, these are some of the things they tend to say. I know this isn't going to work out. I'm too tense. I'm too afraid to bring up problems. I tend to avoid them. I can't breathe. I feel really anxious in this situation. I know you're going to do something to hurt me. What their partners will say, she's anxious, nervous, he's uptight. He cares too much about what others think. He predicts the worst possible outcomes. She complains of feeling bad a lot, headaches, tummy aches. He won't deal with conflict. So strategies, relaxation strategies are so important. Meditation, hypnosis, learning how to deal with conflict, and of course, killing the ants, which we'll talk about. For friends, don't take it personally. Try to listen patiently. Get the scent of lavender, helps decrease anxiety, soothing music, and also helping them with the automatic negative thoughts. And then the last system, deep limbic system, as we talked about, it integrates and gates sensory information, helps to set your emotional tone, is involved in bonding, stores highly charged emotional memories, and is involved with your sense of smell. When someone's limbic system is in a healthy state, we have a lot of good memories. Let's have our friends over. They tend to be more social. I accept your apology. I know you were just having a bad day. Let's have fun. I feel affectionate. Let's cuddle. Negative statements, when the limbic system is working too hard, all I can remember is the bad times. I'm too tired. You go to bed. I can't sleep. I don't feel like being around other people. I don't want to hear you're sorry. You meant to hurt me. So that negativity, I'm not interested in doing anything. So they become more socially isolated. From the partners, you'll hear things like, she's negative. He's often depressed. He doesn't want to be around others. She takes things the wrong way. She or he can't sleep. There's little fun in our relationship. So with the limbic system, what we do is we don't want you to isolate. That doesn't help, even though I know you feel like it. Put smells you like in the environment, especially lavender or from roses. Focus on happy times. So discipline your mind to think about times that brought you joy. It'll make you feel better. Kill the ants, exercise, all of those things help. So again, for partners or friends, try not to take it personally. Even when they feel like isolating, try to spend time with them. Put good smells in the environment. Focus on happy times. Touch, always appropriately, but put your hand on their shoulder. Help with their ants. So what does all this mean? You can control your brain, but you can't control the brains of others. But you can help others if you know about their brains. You can adapt to their needs to help them and yourself. Coming up, we're going to talk about learning how to deal with stress, and we're going to continue on our journey to help you change your brain and change your life so that you can thrive by 25 and beyond.